Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta. You're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump has signaled restraint on Iran, saying he hopefully won't need military action and plans direct talks, while Pentagon officials affirm readiness. In Europe, the European Union brands Iran's Revolutionary Guards a terrorist group, sparking protests in Brussels and warning from European Union leaders that the region can't afford another war. Trump announces a brief ceasefire in Ukraine, claiming Russia has agreed to halt shooting and Putin agreed to spare Kyiv during harsh winter cold. Ukrainian President Zelensky urges US support to stop Russian strikes on energy infrastructure as the European Union blacklists Russia over money laundering risks. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer praises a real progress from his China visit, focusing on trade and ties, but President Trump calls it very dangerous for Britain to engage with Beijing. Donald Trump teases a new Federal Reserve Chair announcement next week, with potential front-runners in the spotlight as he ramps up criticism of the central bank's policies. Trump credits Hamas for facilitating hostage returns and hints at their potential disarmament as bodies of Palestinians returned by Israel arrive at Gaza hospitals amid fragile peace talks. Families demand answers in Spain's tragic train accident as the royal family attends a memorial mass for the victims amid ongoing investigation. Mexican President Sheinbaum and President Trump discussed trade ahead of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement review, aiming to strengthen North American economic ties. Elon Musk's SpaceX and his artificial intelligence company XAI in discussions about a potential merger ahead of a public offering expected later this year. Alright, viewers, on to now the top focus. US President Donald Trump has stated that Cuba will not be able to survive as he continued his pressure campaign against the communist-run island. In an exchange with reporters at the premiere of the documentary film Millennia, Trump defended his actions, clarifying that he was not attempting to choke off Cuba, but expressed concerns for its future, citing the nation's failures and poor treatment of its people. His comments come as part of a broader strategy, with Trump recently signing an executive order declaring a national emergency, allowing the US to impose tariffs on countries that provide oil to Cuba. The decision is seen as a direct move to limit Cuba's access to fuel and further tighten economic pressure on the government. Let's listen in.
I don't know, the word choke off is awfully tough. Cuba is a failing nation, and you have to feel badly for Cuba. They've treated people very badly. We have a lot of Cuban Americans who really were treated very badly, and they'd probably like to go back. And no, I'm not trying to, but it looks like it's something that's just not going to be able to survive. I think Cuba will not be able to survive.
All right, retired Lieutenant Colonel Himanshi Singh, Defense and International Relations Analyst from New Delhi, joins me in this discussion. Thank you very much for joining us, Himanshi Singh, in this discussion. It's a pleasure to have you. Firstly, how do you see this coming across? Of course, the people of Cuba are by now accommodated to these kind of threats from Trump. They've seen the worst, they've had the worst. How prepared really is the country?
Thank you, Kriti. See, when Donald Trump says that Cuba will not be able to survive, it is not just a rhetoric. It is a declaration of economic war. We've seen Cuba surviving the 6 decades of embargo on their trade, and we've seen Cuban-style crisis. So this is not the first time when Washington is predicting Cuba's collapse. The history shows that such predictions have repeatedly failed. We've seen Barack Obama trying to thaw the relationship with Cuba. Somehow we feel that Donald Trump has taken responsibility to sort out the issues of the entire world. He doesn't care about what is happening in Minneapolis and Minnesota, where the democratic right of people is pressing, but he's talking about Cuba that are being bad to people, as you showed in your clip. So Cuba is not just a small Caribbean island, it is a symbolic state. And ever since 1958 revolution, Cuban nationalism has forged the resistance to US dominance and external pressures strong, historically strengthened the internal cohesion. And we know the economy there thrives on sugar cane and the tourism. So when Trump tries to pressurize, it is not governance, it is also people. See, the policy of US is trying to push Cuba deep into the arms of America's global rivals, which is China, Russia, and Korea. So even now, Iran is under a lot of pressure. So what Donald Trump is trying, he's not trying to threaten Cuba. He's trying to threaten his opponents and adversaries, which he sees in these 3-4 countries which I just named. So I think it is not just to feed the Cuban people. It is the pressure to build up on Iran also. And I think humanitarian cost cannot be ignored, because the moment you put pressure on Cuba and you cut down the oil, it is an Achilles heel, because it survives on the oil. The Mexican oil, they have said it cannot be done. Venezuela is already out of question. So it is basically trying to squeeze Cuba to another crisis, which I think will be very difficult for them to survive.
And how do you see the threat that Trump has issued blatantly? He says Cuba will be failing pretty soon after oil from Venezuela and the money support stops.
See, definitely Cuba is going to face the brunt, because the times have changed earlier. But see, America will not put its boots on the ground. The economic sanctions are good enough. Trump knows that the economic strain and the humanitarian consequences have a larger role to play, that we have already seen in many countries. And this is how America operates. They first of all stop all the economic functionalities of a country, and this is how people come against the government, because normal people, common people need food, shelter and security, job crisis. But the moment such pressures are put on a country, then the actual crisis starts, and it is detrimental to any government, which is the ruling government or the chosen government. So Cuba has historically tried to balance its relationships with China and Russia, but these days even they are not coming forward to help countries like Cuba, because the bigger things are at stake. So definitely Cuba is going to face the brunt, but for how long, that we have to see.
Right. Well, thank you very much then, retired Lieutenant Colonel, for joining us. And we move on now, viewers. US President Donald Trump has also announced that he will reveal his nominee for the next Federal Reserve chair on Friday. This announcement comes as speculation intensifies over who will succeed Jerome Powell when his term ends in May. Earlier in the day, during his first cabinet meeting of 2026, Trump reiterated his call for the Fed to significantly lower interest rates, calling the current rate too high. Trump has argued that reducing rates by 2 to 3 percentage points would help stimulate the economy, especially during periods of slow growth. While Powell's term as a Fed chair officially concludes in May, some suggest he may remain at the Fed until 2028 as his separate term as a Board of Governors member expires then. This possibility arises due to continued pressure from the Trump administration, including a Department of Justice investigation into cost overruns at the Fed's headquarters in Washington. Let's hear it.
Well, I think what you're going to see is you will know by the time this movie's over what's going to happen. And I'll be naming the Fed tomorrow morning. I've chosen a very good person to head the Fed. I'll be putting that.
All right, joining me now in this discussion is Dr. Ajay Dua. He's a senior economist and joins us from Singapore. Dr. Dua, thank you very much for joining us. Firstly, how should we see the Fed versus Trump battle going on? Of course, Powell has gone on publicly to say that it's more to do with the Fed's objection to lowering the interest rates that Trump had wanted to than really about the headquarter overhaul project.
Well, thank you for having me in this discussion, though I'm not properly dressed, happen to be caught unawares. Nevertheless, I like to see it's absolutely right that President Trump has been after the Fed to continuously reduce interest rates. It obliged him last year by cutting the rates 3 times. He was probably expecting that in its meeting on the 26th and the 27th, he would further announce a reduction. The fact that Mr. Powell, who is a very eminent banker, central banker, justified by saying that the economic situation of the US is not so bad as is being made out. There is data to support it, that the inflation has not really ballooned, and also that unemployment is not increasing. So by a vote of 10-2 the governors, there are 13 of them, including the president, including Mr. Powell, 10-2, the committee voted that there is no need to further reduce the rates. And thereafter, I think in the customary press conference after the committee's decision, Mr. Powell also justified that he would, when asked that whether he would leave once a successor is named or when his term gets over in May, he did not give a full reply except to say that let's see, because as a former chairman, he could continue as a governor, not necessarily as a chairman, even when his term ends. That's the rule in the United States. I would say that he is standing up for independence of the central banks, and that his stand is justified is also supported by the fact that several other central bank governors or chairmen of other countries in a joint letter soon after the prosecution was launched by President Trump to intimidate Mr. Powell for an alleged offense of cost overrun in a building of the federal bank, that this is an attack on the independence of the federal banks of the whole world, and that such a step must not be taken by anybody in power. And the fact that President Trump has been trying to influence the decision making is when he's also made a lady called Lisa Cook, a governor of the Federal Bank of the US. He terminated her term. She went to the court, has got a stay, and in the trial taking place there. Now the war is somewhat into the open. Mr. Powell has said that he will be attending the trial, though it was not mandatory, and give his point of view if it's asked. So I would say that for the independence, Mr. Powell is working for the independence of the institution, which he has handled very well, and I would wish him that he does not take any abrupt step of resigning just because substitute is named. And the most likely substitute is one Mr. Walsh, who's likely to be announced later this month or later in the day.
Dr. Dua, what do you think? How can Trump's meddling with the Fed really affect the global economy, not just of the United States? Fed, of course, is an independent institution, like you say.
That's right. The question is, what the Fed does is affects the whole world for 2 reasons. One, the US economy is the largest at $23 to $24 trillion. It's a very big trading community. It's capital flows take place from there around the world. That's one reason what the US decides, what the rates there are, that affects the rest of the world. But more important is that the value of the dollar, which is still, though wounded, dollar still continues to be the major currency, reserve currency of the world. every bank in the central bank holds certain amount of dollars to insulate itself from exchanges in the, various kind of changes. So for these two reasons, what happens in the US if they keep on taking decisions, which is what President Trump is likely to do when he has his nominee, saying it is the government deciding what should be the rates, what should be the liquidity, those kind of things, then it would no longer be independent, and that will work adversely against all the other economies of the world, almost every other economy of the world.
All right, Dr. Dua, finally, who do you think is going to be the name that Trump is going to pick? There are four key candidates in the running. There's Rick Reiner, who's the chief investment officer of BlackRock. Then there's a former Fed Governor Kevin Walsh, whom Trump had almost picked up before actually having Powell take over. Then there's Fed Governor Christopher Waller and White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett. So these are the four top runners. Who do you think is going to be Trump's most likely pick?
I was just watching in Singapore certain economic channels. It looks like Mr. Walsh is likely to be the nominee, but this suspense won't remain for too long. In a few hours' time, that announcement is due. We will get to know, and I think a fully independent person is likely to be replaced by a person who may not show the kind of independence which is required of a person. And this is what Mr. Walsh is likely to be. Let the President of the United States meddle even in the affairs of the Federal Bank.
Right. Dr. Dua, thanks very much for your comments here, but I request you to stay on as we proceed. Viewers, now the CEO of Indonesia Stock Exchange has resigned after a major market rout. Moreover, the Jakarta Composite Index has observed its biggest two-day decline since April 2025, dropping over 8%. This follows a warning from index provider Morgan Stanley Capital International about the risk of a downgrade due to concerns over ownership transparency and trading practices in Indonesia. In response, the Indonesian government has announced measures to ease investor concerns. These include raising the free float requirement for listed companies and investigating shareholder affiliations. Foreign capital outflows have also been significant, and they were driven by concerns over President Prabowo Subianto's fiscal policies. Investors are also worried about the growing role of the government in financial markets, including the appointment of key officials like his nephew to the central bank. These moves have reportedly shaken investor confidence. Additionally, the Indonesian rupiah has also reached a record low against the US dollar, falling to 16,985 last week. All right, request Dr. Dua to join me back with his first comments.
Yeah, I'm here. I'd like to say that what has happened in Indonesia had been in the making for quite some time. Last year too, if you would recall, not too long ago, a 7% reduction on one particular date, a day, was seen in the stock exchange of Jakarta. And yesterday, it was at a whopping 10%. And why is it happening? Two or three reasons. One, MSCI, which you mentioned, Morgan Stanley Capital Index, they have clearly said that there are investability concerns about the stock market of Indonesia, which, according to MSCI as well as others, is dominated by certain billionaires of Indonesia. Indonesia, as you know, is being managed, or its large industries, large business houses are managing most of its industry as well as its trading. And that the share allotment to them has not been fair. It's been against the provisions, and it does not invoke confidence of foreign investors in the Indonesian market if the allotment of shares and the control is allowed to be exercised by people not in proportion to their shareholding, but their general standing. Second point, which you have made very clearly, that Indonesia, despite its financial concerns, has, under the new President Prabowo, been making our commitments for social expenditure of an order which it cannot afford. And in addition, he's not kind of given up the projects. For instance, setting up a new at Nusantara, place called Nusantara, an entirely new capital of the country, which will be very expensive project. And presidents, though work had started, have been having second thoughts about how much money to put in there. Finally, I would say that there is one sovereign fund of Indonesia, Damantara. The president is using that extensively to try and borrow funds and make it lend for the projects of the kind which I just mentioned, including the new capital city project. So these kind of things make again, what we talked about in the context of the United States, you're not letting independent regulators, be it out of the stock exchange, be it out of the federal bank, etc., to operate. Because in the federal bank, yesterday or the day before, the president appointed his nephew, who does not have any extensive banking experience or would have been normally selected for this kind of a job if he were not the nephew, as the deputy governor of the Indonesian Federal Bank. Those are the kind of things which are bothering foreign investors. They are bothering the retail investors there, as well as the analysts who have now called it out by saying there are major investability concerns about the Indonesian market and its stock exchange.
Right. Finally, Dr. Dua, what do you think? What are the measures that are needed for Indonesia to take to boost stock market transparency now?
We are an iron hand, regulator for the allotment of shares and the way the stock market is working to bring it on track. Independently appointed, independently allowed to run, the regulators of the stock exchange are immediately required. Second, I would like to see the president himself react and rescind the appointment of his nephew as the deputy governor in order to maintain the independence of the Federal Bank of Indonesia. And third and final point, the president to rein in the expenditure, which is leading to a fiscal deficit, which is going to cause massive inflation of companies of the projects like Nusantara, the new capital. Yes, you don't want to waste the money which has been done, but it doesn't mean that all the expenditure or whatever surplus you have, you will put it into one project and not look after the rest of the country. So these are major decisions in which the president has to realize that if he does not do it, the foreign investment into Indonesia and in its mining industry, in its palm oil industry, there is a great amount of foreign investment, and the country is running these industries, important labor-intensive industries, on the back of the foreign investment. Otherwise, he would be up against other issues, including vast unemployment and social unrest.
Right. All right, Dr. Dua, thanks very much then for joining us. And we move on, viewers. US President Donald Trump has also said that the US is decertifying Bombardier Global Express business jets and threatened a 50% import tariffs on all aircraft made in Canada until the country's regulator certified a number of planes produced by US rival Gulfstream. His declaration comes amid broader tension between the neighboring countries after Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, citing US trade policy, last week urged nations to accept the end of the rules-based global order that Washington had once championed. That threat, if carried out, would have a drastic impact on US carriers like American Airlines and Delta Airlines, which rely heavily on Canadian-made airplanes for many of their regional services. And on to some tech news before we wrap up the bulletin. Now, Perplexity has secured a $750 million deal with Microsoft to access its Azure cloud platform for the next 3 years. This agreement will enable Perplexity, which is backed by NVIDIA, to utilize its AI models from leading companies such as OpenAI, Anthropic, and xAI through Microsoft's Foundry program. A spokesperson for Perplexity confirmed that partnership, stating that company will still remain with Amazon Web Services as its main cloud provider. The deal comes after Perplexity faced a legal challenge from Amazon over its automated shopping feature. The partnership with Microsoft provides a major boost to Perplexity's AI capabilities and expands its access to frontier models. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news and updates.